After my grandmother passed, we discovered her will had a shocking clause that split the family apart. My grandmother, Eleanor, was the kind of woman who could command a room without ever raising her voice. She had this aura, not the mystical kind, but the kind you build after 85 years of life lived on your own terms. The matriarch, the spine of the family, the person whose opinion mattered, whether we admitted it or not. When she died, it felt like a pillar collapsing. Even though she'd been sick for a while, it still shocked us. People like her aren't supposed to go. They're supposed to keep holding everything together forever. Because God knows the rest of us weren't qualified for the job. The funeral was complicated. Not in the logistical sense. She had planned everything years in advance, down to the hymns and the casserole recipes for the wake. But emotionally. Because Eleanor wasn't just our grandmother. She was the glue holding together a family that didn't always want to be glued. Here's the lineup for context. My mom, Anne, Eleanor's eldest daughter. The responsible one. She basically ran Eleanor's errands and finances toward the end. Bitter in that, why do I always have to be the adult kind of way? Uncle Tom, the middle child, classic golden boy turned midlife burnout. He had the biggest house, the fanciest car, and the deepest debts nobody was supposed to talk about. Aunt Linda, the youngest, the wild card, a spiritual healer one year, a real estate hustler the next, always chasing something, never catching it. The cousins, my generation. Me, my sister Rachel, plus Tom's 2 boys and Linda's daughter. We grew up close, drifted apart, and now only saw each other at weddings, funerals, or the occasional forced Christmas. We were a patchwork family of simmering rivalries and unspoken resentments, all stuffed into one funeral home like we weren't all thinking the same thing. What happens now that she's gone? If you've ever been to a family funeral, you know the vibe. A mix of genuine grief, forced politeness, and subtle jockeying for moral high ground. Linda cried the loudest, which was ironic, given she visited Grandma the least. Tom played host, shaking hands, telling stories, keeping his voice steady like a politician trying to win votes. My mom sat stone-faced, accepting condolences with a weary nod, as if she'd already moved on to the to-do list part of grief. Us cousins lurked in the background, trading side eyes, unsure whether to hug or avoid each other. Grandma had requested closed casket, but she was there in every detail. The floral arrangements she'd ordered years ago from her favorite florist, the photos from her youth displayed on easels, even the playlist of jazz standards she'd burned onto a CD back when that was still a thing. It was like she was still running the show, even in death. And here's where I have to be honest. As much as everyone talked about her legacy, her love, her faith, there was another unspoken thought lingering beneath it all. Money. Because Eleanor wasn't just a beloved grandmother. She was also comfortable. Not billionaire rich, not yacht in the Mediterranean rich, but she owned her house outright, had land that had been in the family for decades, and, we all suspected, a tidy nest egg tucked away. For years, it had been a running, half-joking question. What's in Grandma's will? Tom once boasted he'd get the house. Linda hinted Eleanor had promised her help with her spiritual retreat fund. My mom never said anything, but the way she sighed when balancing Eleanor's accounts made me wonder. And us cousins? We joked about inheriting enough to pay off student loans, but deep down, we all wondered too. For me, Grandma wasn't about money. She was about Sunday dinners, where she taught me how to make pot roast the right way. She was about summers spent in her garden, listening to her tell stories about the war, about how she met my grandfather, about the sacrifices she made so her kids could have better. She once told me, "Families fall apart when money gets in the middle. Promise me you won't let that happen to ours." I promised. I meant it. But promises are easy when the person holding you accountable is still alive. After the funeral, once the last casserole was scraped clean and the last sympathy card was opened, the whispers started. When's the will being read? Did she leave instructions? Who's the executor? Turns out Grandma had chosen Mr. Daly, her old lawyer, as executor. The reading was scheduled for the following week, at his office downtown. And that's when the real tension began. Because grief was one thing, but dividing Eleanor's legacy. That was going to dig up every old wound, every buried grudge, every suspicion. We all thought we knew what was coming. A house split 3 ways between the kids, maybe some cash for the grandkids, a few sentimental items. But we were wrong. So wrong. If funerals are the theater of grief, then will readings are the theater of greed. I don't mean that cynically, okay, maybe a little. But you can't gather a family in a law office to discuss dividing assets without the air changing. It's like everyone's sitting on a live wire. Mr. Daly's office was downtown, in one of those brick buildings that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. The waiting room had a ficus plant that looked as exhausted as the receptionist. We gathered there, our dysfunctional clan, like contestants on a game show we hadn't signed up for but couldn't walk away from. Mr. Daly, white-haired, bespectacled, and as patient as a saint, ushered us into a long conference room with a polished oak table. At the head sat a stack of envelopes and a binder that looked thick enough to be a phone book. He began with the usual formalities: condolences, acknowledgement of Eleanor's long life, a reminder that her wishes were to be respected. Everyone nodded solemnly, but you could practically hear the impatience buzzing. Tom leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, already looking smug. Linda dabbed her eyes with a tissue like she was auditioning for an Oscar. My mom sat stiff as a board, pen and paper ready, because of course she was taking notes. We, the cousins, sat scattered along the sides, pretending not to care, but secretly hanging on every word. The first part of the will was normal, almost boring. Jewelry and heirlooms were designated for certain people. Mom got Grandma's wedding ring. Linda got a string of pearls. Tom got Grandpa's old watch. Rachel and I were left Grandma's cookbook collection, which honestly made me tear up more than anything else. Those recipes were her soul on paper. Mr. Harris, the neighbor who mowed her lawn for years, was left $5,000 as a thank you. That got a collective raised eyebrow, but no one complained. It all seemed standard, predictable, peaceful. Then Mr. Daly cleared his throat. There is, however, he said, adjusting his glasses, an additional stipulation regarding the distribution of the primary estate, including the house and land. You could feel the room tighten, like everyone inhaled at once. Mr. Daly read, "It is my wish that my estate, including my house, the land it sits on, and the remaining assets in my accounts, not be divided in equal shares among my children. Instead, it shall pass in full to whichever of my descendants has most faithfully upheld the values of family unity, responsibility and care, as judged by the executor." Silence. Utter silence. It was like the floor tilted. Tom was the first to break it. He laughed, an ugly, sharp laugh. "Well, that's obvious, isn't it? I've got the family name to carry on, the big house, the responsibilities." Linda cut him off like a knife. "You mean the debts? The gambling? The fact that Mom had to bail you out twice?" Tom's face turned red. "Better than running off to Sedona to heal chakras while Mom was in the hospital." Mom slammed her pen down. "Enough. Neither of you was there when she needed groceries or her meds or a ride to the doctor. Who did that? Me. For years. While you two played at being children." The cousins and I just sat frozen, watching decades of resentment explode across Mr. Daly's polished table. Mr. Daly held up his hand. "If I may clarify, Mrs. Eleanor did not intend this to become a contest. She believed that one of you, or your children, would naturally stand out by your actions. My role is to interpret her intent and finalize the transfer accordingly." Translation: he was the judge. And our family had just been thrown into a competition from beyond the grave. I didn't even know how to process it. On one hand, I remembered her words to me. Families fall apart when money gets in the middle. And here she was, putting money right in the middle. On the other hand, maybe this was her twisted way of forcing us to reckon with who we'd been and who we'd become. But looking around that room, Tom fuming, Linda theatrically sobbing, Mom scribbling furious notes, all I could think was, Grandma lit a fuse, and she knew exactly what she was doing. When we left Daly's office, the air was thick with hostility. Nobody spoke in the elevator. Nobody hugged goodbye. But I could feel it in the silence. The war had begun. Because this wasn't about keepsakes or small checks anymore. This was about the house, the land, the legacy. And only one person, one family line, was going to get it. The rest of us would get nothing. You'd think, after the shock of the will reading, we'd all take a breath. Maybe reflect. Maybe let cooler heads prevail. But if funerals bring out the best in people, wills bring out the worst. The week after Mr. Daly dropped Grandma's bombshell, the family went from grief-stricken solidarity to open warfare. Tradition dictated that we all gather at Mom's house for Sunday dinner, especially after a funeral. She insisted we keep it going, like honoring Grandma's spirit. But that dinner turned into a battlefield. It started polite enough. Rachel and I helped Mom set the table. Tom showed up with his wife and kids. Linda breezed in 20 minutes late with some excuse about traffic. The cousins sat clustered at one end, whispering like we were back in middle school. Then Tom raised his glass. To Mom, a woman who knew what responsibility looked like. I know she trusted me to carry on her legacy. I swear you could hear Linda's eye roll. Oh, please? Legacy? You mean the foreclosure notices she bailed you out of? Don't make me laugh. Tom slammed his glass down, wine sloshing. You don't know what you're talking about. I've supported this family more than you ever did. Mom's voice cut through, sharp as a knife. Both of you stop. If anyone deserves that estate, it's me. I was the one who sat by her bed every night, who managed her accounts, who... Linda threw up her hands. Oh, here we go. The martyr routine. Within minutes, dinner was forgotten. It was just shouting, accusations, decades of resentment spilling like poison. The cousins and I sat frozen, forks halfway to our mouths, pretending to eat while the adults went nuclear. That was the moment I realized. Grandma's family unity clause had done the opposite. She hadn't brought us together. She'd given us a reason to tear each other apart. After that dinner, lines were drawn. Tom leaned hard into his provider role. He boasted about his big house, his financial responsibility, ignoring the debt behind it. He started parading his sons around like trophies, talking about their college scholarships as proof of his legacy. Linda leaned into victimhood. She told anyone who would listen that she'd been overlooked her whole life, and that Grandma had secretly promised her a bigger share. She dragged her daughter into it too, hinting that the estate could finally give them stability. Mom turned into a drill sergeant. She collected receipts, calendars, records of every doctor's appointment she took Grandma to. She built a case like she was preparing for trial. And us cousins? We were caught in the middle. Rachel sided with Mom, of course. She lived nearby, saw the sacrifices firsthand. Tom's sons backed him up, not because they believed in him, but because they knew their future tuition might ride on it. Linda's daughter floated between camps, mostly staying quiet, clearly embarrassed by her mom's dramatics. And me? I didn't want to pick a side. But neutrality wasn't an option anymore. It didn't take long for the whispering to start. Tom called me one night, his voice oily with false warmth. You know, Grandma always admired your work ethic. If you backed me, I could make sure you and Rachel are taken care of. A week later, Linda cornered me in a coffee shop. Don't let your mom bully everyone. Grandma loved me the most. She told me things she never told anyone else. If Daly sees that, we could all share. Even Mom wasn't above it. She sat me down at her kitchen table, sliding a folder of documents toward me. Look at this. Every grocery receipt, every check I wrote for her meds. If this isn't proof of responsibility, I don't know what is. I need you to back me when Daly asks. It was surreal. These were the adults who raised me, now acting like rival politicians lobbying for endorsements. And I was the swing vote. The worst part wasn't the greed. It was the way old wounds came roaring back. Tom accused Mom of being controlling, dredging up stories from their childhood about her bossing him around. Linda accused Tom of being Mom's favorite, pointing to every Christmas gift discrepancy from 30 years ago. Mom accused Linda of abandoning the family, reminding her of the time she skipped Thanksgiving to go to a yoga retreat. Arguments weren't about the will anymore. They were about everything. Every slight, every jealousy, every childhood scar. The will was just the excuse. One night, after yet another blow-up, the cousins gathered in my apartment. For the first time in years, we actually talked like friends. This is insane, Rachel said. Tell me about it, Tom's eldest muttered. Dad's obsessed. He won't shut up. Linda's daughter looked close to tears. My mom says this is our chance to finally be respected. But I don't even care about the money. We made a pact. No matter what happened, we wouldn't let this tear us apart. The older generation could fight themselves bloody, but we wouldn't repeat their mistakes. I believed it in that moment. But promises are easier to make than to keep. Because within weeks, things escalated further. Lawyers got involved. Letters flew back and forth. Every family dinner turned into a tribunal. Mr. Daly tried to mediate, reminding everyone that Eleanor wanted unity. But it was useless. The will wasn't a roadmap, it was a Rorschach test. Everyone saw what they wanted to see, and everyone believed they were the rightful heir. And me? I started to wonder if Eleanor had done this on purpose, if she'd known her children well enough to predict this exact explosion. If her real test wasn't about values, but about survival. By the time lawyers started circling, the will wasn't just a legal document anymore. It was a weapon. Every word was twisted, every phrase dissected, every memory reinterpreted to fit someone's claim. But here's the thing about wills. They're like treasure maps. Once greed gets involved, people start digging everywhere, even in places that should have stayed buried. And when we started digging into Grandma Eleanor's past, we found things none of us were ready for. It started with Rachel. She was helping Mom comb through old boxes in Grandma's attic, trying to piece together evidence of all the care she'd given. In between stacks of utility bills and recipe clippings, Rachel found a manila envelope marked private. Inside were bank statements, not from Grandma's regular credit union, but from an entirely different bank. And the balances? They were shocking. Tens of thousands, spread across several CDs and savings accounts we'd never heard of. When Rachel told me, I thought she was exaggerating, but she showed me the statements. Grandma had quietly been sitting on more money than any of us realized. Not millions, but enough to completely upend expectations. The kicker? Those accounts weren't mentioned in the will. At all. Which meant either Eleanor forgot, unlikely given how meticulous she was, or she deliberately kept them separate, hidden from the family squabbles she knew were coming. In the same envelope was a handwritten letter, addressed simply to my children. It wasn't long, but it was brutal in its clarity. I know you will fight. I know you will disappoint me. But the one who deserves this will not be the loudest, or the angriest, or the greediest. It will be the one who remembers that family is more than money. When Mom read that letter, she nearly cried. Tom dismissed it as cryptic nonsense. Linda claimed it was proof that Grandma had meant her, because she understood spirituality. To me, it felt like a warning. Eleanor knew exactly what she was doing. She knew this would light a fire, and she left just enough clues for us to burn ourselves down with it. While Rachel uncovered the bank accounts, I found something else. In a box of photo albums tucked behind yellowing Polaroids was a stack of photographs I'd never seen. They showed Grandma in her 30s and 40s, with a man who wasn't my grandfather. Same house, same garden, but a different man at her side, arm around her, smiling like they belonged to each other. On the back of one photo, in Eleanor's handwriting, was a date, 1968, and a name, for me and Henry, always. I froze. Henry wasn't my grandfather's name. When I showed the photos to Mom, her face went white. That's not possible, she whispered. But the look in her eyes told me she already knew something. Tom, when he saw them, shrugged. So she had a fling. Who cares? But Linda latched onto it like a hawk. This changes everything. What if Henry's family has a claim? What if we're not the only heirs? The idea spread like wildfire. Suddenly, every conversation turned into speculation. Did Eleanor have another child? Did she funnel money to someone outside the family? Were we even the only ones in line? We brought everything to Mr. Daly. The bank accounts, the letter, the photos. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he sighed like a man who'd been expecting this. Mrs. Eleanor was a complex woman, he said carefully. She made her choices deliberately. If she left these items outside the will, it was intentional. But what about Henry? Linda pressed. Daly adjusted his glasses. If there is another heir, it would need to be substantiated. Without legal documentation, these photographs are not proof. Which was lawyer speak for. You just made this even messier. Word leaked, of course. Families can't keep secrets. Suddenly, cousins were whispering about the other man. Neighbors dropped hints about that period when Eleanor was always out late. And even Mom confessed that she remembered arguments between Grandma and Grandpa she never understood as a child. The image of Eleanor as the perfect matriarch cracked. And once it cracked, everything spilled out. Tom insisted the hidden money was his, since he was the natural patriarch. Linda claimed the letter was clearly meant for her, since she was the only one who understood love over money. Mom doubled down, pulling records of her years of caregiving, saying no hidden lover or bank account changed the fact that she was the responsible one. The cousins? We were stuck in the middle, wondering if we even knew our grandmother at all. I remember one night vividly. I was sitting at my kitchen table, photos of Henry spread out in front of me, the letter folded carefully beside them. And I realized this wasn't about money anymore. It wasn't even about the house, or the land, or the accounts. It was about truth, about who Eleanor really was, and whether she'd spent her whole life hiding it from us. And part of me couldn't help but think, maybe that was the real inheritance. Not money, not property, but the fallout of her secrets. The day Tom announced he'd retained counsel, everything shifted. Up until then, the fights were loud, ugly, emotional, but still family fights. The second lawyers got involved. It stopped being just us shouting at each other over Sunday dinners. It became official, cold, weaponized. I'll never forget the knock at my door. I opened it to find a process server standing there, manila envelope in hand. "Are you my full name?" I nodded. "You've been served." Just like that, I was in it. My Uncle Tom had subpoenaed me, his own nephew, for testimony about Eleanor's final months, specifically whether I had witnessed favoritism or statements regarding inheritance intent. It was surreal. I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't rich, I wasn't even trying to take a side. But suddenly, I was a piece of evidence. Tom's lawyer was a shark in a suit. Slick hair, expensive tie, fake charm. He framed Tom as the natural heir, the only stable male presence in the family line, the one fit to maintain Eleanor's property. Linda hired a different kind of lawyer, all theatrics and drama, emphasizing unfair promises and emotional harm from being denied her rightful inheritance. She leaned hard on the mysterious Henry photographs, suggesting Eleanor's intent was muddied, that Daly couldn't objectively decide. Mom didn't even want to hire a lawyer at first. She thought the facts spoke for themselves. But after getting steamrolled in early hearings, she caved. Her lawyer was practical, no nonsense, armed with binders of receipts and medical records, painting her as the selfless caregiver who had earned Eleanor's trust. And me. I sat through depositions, sweating, trying not to say the wrong thing. I wanted to scream, "Why are we doing this? She's dead. None of this changes what she meant to us." But in courtrooms, meaning doesn't matter. Paperwork does. The hearings were chaos. Tom's lawyer paraded financial records, twisting debts into strategic investments. Linda's lawyer waved the Henry photos like smoking guns, suggesting the entire family tree might be invalid. Mom's lawyer hammered caregiving hours, bills paid, rides given. At one point, the judge, an older woman with zero patience, sighed so loudly it echoed. "This is a probate hearing, not a soap opera," she said. But it was too late. It had already become a soap opera. The worst part wasn't the lawyers. It was what happened outside court. Tom stopped speaking to Mom entirely. Linda unfriended everyone on Facebook, then began posting cryptic, passive-aggressive rants about betrayal. Family dinners ended. Holidays were canceled. Cousins stopped calling. The unity Grandma had wanted was gone, obliterated by affidavits and court filings. When it was my turn to testify, I thought I could stay neutral. Just answer questions, keep my head down. But the lawyers twisted everything. Did Eleanor ever say Tom was irresponsible? Did Eleanor ever criticize Linda? Did she ever express frustration at Anne? Every answer I gave, no matter how careful, was turned into a weapon. Walking out of that courthouse, I realized neutrality was a myth. By speaking at all, I'd already taken sides. Then came the bombshell. During financial discovery, Mom's lawyer uncovered another account, bigger than the first hidden ones Rachel found, almost 6 figures. And the beneficiary? Not Tom, not Linda, not Mom. It was listed under my name. I almost fainted when Mom told me. "This must be a mistake," I said. But the paperwork was clear. Eleanor had quietly set aside money for me, and only me. The family went ballistic. Tom accused me of conspiring with Daly. Linda said Grandma had been manipulated. Even Mom, my own mother, looked at me with suspicion in her eyes. I didn't even want the damn money. But in their eyes, I was suddenly the enemy. That was the breaking point. Lawyers circled, families screamed, and I realized this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about identity, about who Grandma was, who we were, and what we were willing to destroy to win. The hearings dragged on for months. By the end, we weren't a family. We were litigants, opponents, strangers with the same blood but nothing else in common. And through it all, I kept hearing Eleanor's words. Families fall apart when money gets in the middle. She was right, and she was the one who put it there. After nearly a year of hearings, filings, counterfilings, and more passive-aggressive texts than I thought humanly possible, the judge finally issued her ruling. Mr. Daly's role as executor meant he had to weigh Eleanor's stipulation, who upheld family unity and responsibility. After reviewing everything, the caregiving, the debts, the chaos, he concluded that Mom had the strongest case. So the house, the land, and the remaining named assets went to her. But the hidden accounts? Those were separate. The smaller ones Rachel found were ruled as general estate funds, to be split. The big account with my name on it? The judge said Eleanor had deliberately designated me. It wasn't part of the estate. It was mine. The gavel came down. Case closed. But it wasn't over. Not really. Tom stormed out of the courtroom red-faced, swearing he'd appeal. He didn't. He couldn't afford to. Linda cried, clutched her daughter, then hissed at me. You knew about this. You played us. Even Mom's victory was hollow. She won the house, but at what cost? Tom stopped speaking to her entirely. Linda told anyone who would listen that Anne had rigged everything. And me? I became the black sheep overnight. The cousins, who had promised to stick together, pulled away. Tom's sons unfollowed me on social media. Linda's daughter stopped replying to my texts. Rachel still stood by me, but even she admitted, "It looks bad, like Grandma picked you. I hadn't asked for that money, I didn't even want it." But inheritance isn't about want. It's about perception. And the perception was, I'd been favored. The house itself became a ghost. Mom tried moving in, but it didn't feel right. Every room echoed with memories, and every memory felt tainted. Thanksgiving was supposed to be there that year. Instead, Mom sat alone, carving a turkey for two while Tom hosted his own gathering, and Linda flew off to Arizona. I visited once. Walking through those halls, I felt nothing but heaviness. The garden where Grandma taught me about roses. The kitchen where she showed me her pot roast tricks. The living room where we opened Christmas presents. It was all the same, and completely different. I didn't last 20 minutes before leaving. The account Eleanor left me sat untouched for months. I couldn't even bring myself to log into it. When I finally did, I stared at the number. This cold string of digits that had cost me my family. Friends said I was lucky. Hey, at least you got something. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt cursed. Eventually, I used some of it to pay off student loans. I donated a portion to the local food bank, the one Grandma had volunteered at years ago. That felt right, at least. But no matter what I did, it didn't erase the bitterness it left behind. Months later, Linda sent me a message. She'd hired a private investigator, because of course she had. Turns out the man in the photographs, Henry, had been real. He and Eleanor had an affair for nearly a decade. No secret second family, but deep enough that it explained the hidden accounts. Some were joint, some were hers alone. It wasn't scandalous enough to rewrite our family tree, but it was enough to shatter the myth of Eleanor as the flawless matriarch. For Linda, that was vindication. For me, it was just sad. Eleanor had carried secrets her whole life, and instead of peace at the end, she left us with confusion and suspicion. It's been 5 years now. Tom still doesn't speak to Mom. Linda still posts cryptic Facebook rants. The cousins are scattered, polite when we bump into each other. But the closeness we once had is gone. The house was eventually sold. Mom couldn't bear living there, and the upkeep was too much. Watching it pass to strangers was surreal, like watching a part of our family history vanish. As for me, I still have some of the money. Most of it's been put into savings. Sometimes I think about using it to build something in Eleanor's memory. A scholarship maybe, or a garden. Something that gives back instead of tearing down. But then I remember her words to me. Families fall apart when money gets in the middle. And I think maybe that was the lesson. In the end, it wasn't property or money, or even the secrets that defined our inheritance. It was the fractures, the silence, the proof that even the strongest families can crumble under pressure. We inherited distance. We inherited mistrust. We inherited the knowledge that love doesn't always survive greed. And me? I inherited the heaviest burden of all, knowing that in her final act, Eleanor gave me something that destroyed the very thing she wanted to preserve. Sometimes I wonder if she knew that, if she did it on purpose. If her will was less about money and more about showing us who we really were. If so, then she succeeded. But I wish, more than anything, that she hadn't.